Welcome to All Right in Sin City, a podcast about writers and writing in the Windsor-Detroit region. Your podcasters today are
Sarah Jarvis, former bookseller, publishing rep, and literary festival chair.
Kim Conklin, Windsor-based writer and filmmaker.
and me, Irene Moore Davis, author, educator, and local historian. Welcome to All Right in Sin City. This recording takes place in our respective homes because we're in the era of social distancing. So our featured guest today is Fartumo Kusow. Born in Somalia, Fartumo Kusow immigrated to Canada in 1991 at the start of the Civil War. After arriving in Canada with fluency in Somali and Arabic, she went on to earn an Honours B.A. in English Language and Literature and a Bachelor of Education from the University of Windsor. She's now a high school English teacher for the Greater Essex County District School Board. Her first novel, Amran, was serialized in 1984 in Somalia. Her second novel, Tale of a Boon's Wife, was published in 2017 by Second Story Press, and it's her debut novel in English. Set in the 15-year period before Somalia's civil war, Tale of a Boon's Wife focuses on a young Somali woman whose decision to marry the man she loves in defiance of tradition and her family's wishes transforms her life in very difficult ways. The novel has received some wonderfully positive reviews. Fartumo Kusow is a mother of 5, and she lives in Windsor, Ontario. Welcome, Fartumo.
Thank you, thank you.
Fartumo, when did you first know that you wanted to be a writer?
I think me wanting a writer became out of necessity, I think. So I remember I was the youngest of a family of 7. My parents had my sister and then 5 boys, and I was the youngest. And I was lucky enough to be raised by parents who didn't have an education but believed my sister and I had the equal right to education as my brothers did. So, and I was treated like, to my brother's dismay, since I was the baby, like a princess at home. But I didn't really have I didn't know all the unwritten social rules. So hence I really had a hard time making friends at school. So I was really, really good at when it came to books, when it came to socializing. For example, if people gossiped about something in the yard, I didn't know what people gossiped about in the yard. You didn't talk about it. And I was, and because I was so bright, I was pushed up a couple of years. So when I graduated, I was only 16. But if my parents were not determined for me to get an education, I would have just quit and did something else, but I couldn't. So I was in grade 10, I think, or grade 9, and then I'm back home too. You failed grade 1 if you didn't perform. Nobody really worried about your self-esteem or nothing like that. So in any given year, when I was in grade 4, for example, and I was maybe 9 or 8, there might be kids who are 11 or 12 in the same grade because they failed a couple of years. So I remember being in grade 9 or 10, I can't remember, and it was so we had subject teachers. So we had this chemistry teacher who was really, really young, maybe 21, not much younger. But there are kids, I was only 14, but there are kids that are 17 in the grade. And I grew up in a communist country where I wasn't allowed to wear a headscarf, wasn't allowed to wear a uniform. So we either had to wear braids and a uniform, short sleeve blouse, and a khaki pants, and that was it. No makeup, no jewelry, no head covering, nothing. That everybody has to be the same. So, we're teenagers, so we want to wear eyeliners or whatever. So if the teacher saw you wearing eyeliner, they're going to ask you to go wash it off in the bathroom. So there's this girl in chemistry class that's maybe 16 or 17, but in that chemistry class, she's allowed to wear little jewelry or eyeliner or whatever. And the gossip in the yard is this girl's allowed all this because the chemistry teacher is sleeping with her. That's the gossip in the yard. But I'm the only one who doesn't know it's only a gossip, and probably we're just being jealous of her because she looks better than the rest of us. So anyway, and then we write this chemistry unit test, and then the teacher says, everybody did poorly, and she was the one who got the highest mark, which was 75%. And I thought, this girl is so dumb. She can't balance this equation. How could she get better than me? So I raised my hand and I asked the teacher, did you get that mark? Was you sleeping with her?
Oh my goodness.
And he said, get out. And I, for the first time, was suspended for 3 days. And there's no phones. I live in a farm. So principal writes a note, puts an envelope and gives it to me. My father looks at it and she says, please tell me you didn't say this. And I said, I did. Everybody's talking about why am I only picking me? And you have to get me back to school. I can't miss 3 days. And then from that day on, he said, because I said, people gossip. And he said, but that's just a gossip. And I said, why would they say it's not true? And he says, just because that's how people work. They say things that are not true and you're not supposed to tell. And he couldn't convince me. Then he gave me a notebook and he said, take this notebook, anything people gossip, write it down. And show it to me night after that, then I'll tell you if it's okay. So it's like stupid things like, so-and-so said so-and-so is fat, so-and-so said whatever. And he said, surely this is not a nice thing to do. So a few weeks in, I decided I might as well write stories. What's the point of this? So I think I started writing when I was maybe 12 or 13 and had my first publication when I was accepted when I was 15. So that's how it became out of necessity. But I knew after that I really loved writing.
It's fascinating that as such a young person in Somalia in 1984, you had your first novel serialized by the national newspaper.
Yeah. And I was the only woman that had a paper published from the inception until it was canceled. So I was, so what happened was, as after I started writing, the paper had this, where they would give the students nationally writing prompt. And then you write 250 whatever, and then you give it to a local representative, and that person types it, because we didn't have a typewriter, and then they get it. So in 1983, I won that competition, writing competition. I wrote an article about arranged marriages. It was about family structure. That was the prompt, write about family structure. So I wrote about arranged marriages and its impact. It was like about 1 page. And then and the paper gave me like, you won something. Sometimes you want a trip to the National Art Gallery, something. So that year I won a column where I write a column, social column for the paper once a week. So when I started writing the social column, they just said, oh, do you have anything else you wrote? You really are a good writer. So that's how and I just showed the editor what I had. So I used that original paper in my original stories about the impact on arranged marriages, forced marriages, if you will, on women.
Wow.
That's fantastic. So Somali culture has very rich, long-standing traditions of poetry and storytelling. So how do you feel those traditions have influenced your work as a writer of fiction?
It influenced very well because my mother didn't read or write, and that was one regret of her forever. And she was, because her mother died when she was 6, and her family didn't have much, so she became the mother of the family. Got married in an arranged marriage at a very young age, at 13 or 14. So she was always committed to my sister and I having education, which she didn't have. But she was really, really fantastic storyteller. She had all these stories that she would tell us at night, because there's no TV or nothing. So we would sit after we did homework and she would tell us those stories. And some of them she heard when she was young, and some of them I could tell she made it up as she told us. So that really had a lot. And even in my writing, that idea of storytelling comes through.
So how is it different writing in Somali as it from writing in English? What's the difference in the process, or how you approach the work, or what difference does the language change make?
I think as far as the structure of the story is the same, but I think I'm always self-conscious that English is in fact my third language. So I don't have as much confidence as I would have in Arabic and in Somali, because those are my language that I learned when I was young. And even when I was trying to apply a teaching job, and I decided that, because I was never supposed to work, the idea was that I would get an English degree, do my master's in fiction, and write books. And my husband then would support the family. But I went to teachers college when the marriage failed. So I decided I was going to add biology because I've never thought I would be hired as an English teacher. And in fact, it's the English degree that got me the job because they needed more English teachers than science teachers. So I think that besides me being very self-conscious and feeling that, it's like that baseball game and there are 3 strikes and you're out. I already have the 3 strikes. I'm wearing a head cover and I'm a Black woman and I have English as a second language. So I think at least I hold this feeling that my work would always suffer that strike and those 3 strikes, and I have to. So I'm always trying to read every chapter 20 times. So it takes me forever to get through it. Even I have friends who they read for me and they just tell me, don't touch it again because they're going to destroy it, because I'm always revising and I'm always, I send the chapter and I say, this doesn't look like what you sent last time. Why did you change all these? So I'm always running through that self-consciousness. But I think the idea of my love for writing is still the same.
Fartumo, you've been quoted as saying that writing is your social activism. How is activism expressed through your fiction writing?
It's and that's, I think, one other drawback that I suffer is that I can't really write those romantic, beautiful, feel-good books. Because I'm not built, I don't think, I've always admired those people that when something happens, they can always get on and they can set, GoFundMe page and they do this and they collect money and they fundraising. If somebody emailed and said, we're collecting money, I can do that part, but I never that's a really good idea. How does she think that? It never really clicks on me. But I think in my writing, I always like to write about issues that we don't want to talk about. Issues that are challenges faced by women, mainly challenges faced by people that are prejudiced or pushed or othered somehow or another. So I think I'm hoping that my writing would be my part of saying, this is what's wrong with our society and this is what we could work on. And I think the book I'm working now that's kind of like I struggle to find an agent for is a young woman that are kidnapped by religious radicals. So writing that, I would get both sides. People that are from that community where religious radicalism exists might think that I'm airing their dirty laundry. And other people might just see, this is just too violent. Do I even want to deal with this?
So present day affairs and issues, were they partly what inspired you to write Tale of a Boon's Wife?
Yes. So in Somalia, we have tribal system that's different than colorism at the same time. But the idea is people are divided tribes based on, some people are, prejudiced based on their profession, people who do blacksmith and metal work and so on. Some people are prejudiced because they look a little bit more African than everybody else, whatever that means. And some people are because of the part of the country where they're located. So it's that system that existed before the government, when we had a functioning government and functioning law and order. But now that system is still continuously used. So, if, depending how high you are in that tribal system, the more protection you have, because the tribes there are, it's like not having insurance coverage in Canada, not having a car insurance, health insurance, life insurance, home insurance. So your tribe is essentially all your insurance. If you get into a fight and break somebody's arm, the tribe would be who pays the restitution. So the more power the tribe have, that's not really necessarily the number of the tribes population, but where they sit in that control that they created. That's almost like, racial issue we have in North America, or the challenges with Indigenous population to the rest of the Canadian and Canada, things like that. So so that's the idea that I'm trying to look at and see what role do all of us collectively play in either participating or allowing something like that to exist. So it's almost kind of like questioning ourselves and figuring out what is it are we doing as a part of that collective group.
What inspired you to write the tale of the Boon's wife?
I remember in 2000, so I always wanted to write, but then my marriage failed in 99, and life got in the way. Now I had to get a job and I had to support, and I had 5 kids. So it took a whole lot of money and a whole lot of energy to get them through and out of my house. So it was 2011, I think. That's the first time that I thought maybe I would write. And I was just tinkering with the idea, and I watched this a newscast that story takes place in Somalia, and somebody shared it on YouTube, where 3 boys that were barely maybe 14, 15, were arrested because somebody had accused them of stealing a cell phone. And those 2 boys, and I can't explain how I knew, but they belonged to this other group that were called the Boon, or which is a derogatory term, almost using the N-word in North American context. So they were there for this accusation. They stole a cell phone. There was no representative or advocate or lawyer for them. Their mothers were there trying to advocate for them, but there's nobody officially advocating for them. There was no defense lawyer, nothing like that. There was just the lawyer from the city or whatever, or the government side. And then at the end, they were within the same day, they were accused, they were charged, they were convicted, and the charge at the end was they would lose a hand or something to that effect. So I remember watching and thinking, what would have happened if those boys belonged to the right tribe? A tribe that could say, okay, sorry, they stole a cell phone. How much was it? Here's $300. We will have a chat with the boys, and they would never do this again. Sorry, they did this. We apologize, and everything would have been fine. But because they don't have that, because not only they're paying the money, but the tribe of the person that lost the cell phone is afraid of somebody coming after them if they convict these boys. So it's kind of that power that would be in play, and those boys would have been fine just because they were wrong. They were coming from the wrong tribe, which lack of education, poverty, because of where they're placed in the social structure. Those kids had to face that severe consequence without somebody even knowing, did they really steal the cell phone, and how much was it worth, and was it worth their hand, and all that. So I remember thinking that maybe what would have happened if people were being prejudiced as this tribe before the war, and now they had to go through the war. Because when most of us left, those were the groups of people that stayed, because most of them are inland, so they're not close to way to travel. They didn't have the education or the financial resource or the connection to leave the country. So 90, 80, 70% of the people is still inside the country after the Civil War are the people that belong to those tribes. So I thought, how was what happened before the war could impact their outcome after the war? So that's how I started writing about this story of what would somebody do? How can I create the intersection of this tribe to that tribe?
Was it hard to find a publisher? Tell us about finding your publisher.
It was really, really difficult. And I thought, it took me 3 years to write the book and get to a point where I thought I could show it to people. But then I shopped around. I think I had something like, between small publishers and agents and whatever, I had 104 rejections before I was able to get, so the second story picked it up and published it without an agent. So once they really liked it, but it took them, even for them to respond, maybe 9 months. I think I must have sent it to March of 2015. And then they wanted the full at the November, and then they didn't respond until the following October. But once they wanted. So we signed the contract December, and they wanted it out the following October. It was very quick, but it took essentially 6 years from when I started to when it came out.
Thank you so much for being willing to share that, because that's the piece of writing that we often don't hear.
Mm-hmm.
That struggle to find a place for your voice to be heard. I'm so glad that you're willing to share that information. After the publication of Tale of a Boon's Wife, you toured Canada and the United States, and you made stops at literary events in the UK and Somalia. I'm wondering, did you observe any differences in the way audience in different countries responded to the novel?
I think reaction was depended on when I went to universities. For example, in the States, students in universities were very interested in the idea, because they could see how the connection is made, especially I went to University of Iowa, because that university is using as part of their texts for gender and ethnicity studies department. So they were really, really very interested in understanding how the work and the complexities and the difference between, and most of them found difficult that somebody who lives in Africa, people that are all African, that all live in Africa, has this kind of like dichotomy of saying this person is less than me because of what they look like or because of the type of jobs they do. That was fascinating to them. And I found the people who are from Somalia, who are maybe my age or a little bit older, resented the idea, because they thought, it was kind of like, that's that. And so, because the challenge is there are two languages in that context, where a parent might say, I am okay to marry whoever you want. Even people that live in North America, they might say, I'm okay to marry whoever you want. But if their daughter or their son brings somebody from that other tribe, they might not like it. So the parents kind of like would say, no, everybody, as long as their religion is what matters to me, or being a good person is what matters to me, but that's not really reality. So that group kind of like struggled with the idea of saying, no, it's deep rooted in that. And if you could understand how you're being prejudiced of being a Black person in North America, then you could see that that's how it worked for those people too, because not only marriage, but it affected their opportunity to get the right education, to get into universities, to get the right jobs. It affects all aspects of their lives. So I found the younger populations, people who are in college, are very open-minded and eager to figure out, because some of the students in Iowa were asking me, is this colorism? It's not really a colorism, and it's not even race, because you might see somebody who looks just as dark and has curly hair belonging to the right tribe because they were born into that tribe, versus somebody who's in that tribe and the prejudiced tribe.
Wow. So you're a mother of 5, you're a teacher, you've had some elder care responsibilities lately as well. How do you generally carve out time for your writing?
So I generally try to write at least an hour a day, especially when the kids were young. So now my kids are older. My youngest is 22, so I don't have, except my checkbook, I don't have physical responsibility to them. So, but I have my mother who's on late stage Alzheimer's and needs around the clock care. And, so usually I have an hour a day. So sometimes I might do half an hour in the morning, half an hour in the evening. And just sometimes I sit in front of the computer and do nothing. And some days I can have, 1,000 words for that 1 hour. So that has been good, helped me. And last year I applied Canada Arts Council, and which they give $25,000 for you to finish a manuscript. So I was able to get that. And I took the first semester of the school year off. So I didn't work from September to January. And I was able to finish that manuscript and start sending it out. And now I was back, so I could write. I was getting somebody to come and watch my mother 3 hours a night for 4 nights a week, so I could do some writing. But now that's been canceled, but I'm at home, so I'm writing when she goes to bed. But usually I commit to reading at least 1 hour a day and writing at least 1 hour a day.
So can you tell us a little bit more about that project, that manuscript?
The one I'm working on?
Yeah.
This one is untitled on Winter of My Spring. And it's following three young girls, 13-year-olds, one 12-year-old and one 13-year-old. And they are living in a small coastal town, and they're kidnapped by religious radical group to serve as young brides for boy soldiers that are causing this. So then I'm trying to examine that so when these girls are taken by these religious radicals and not a fault of their own, all three would have a totally different reaction to this trauma. And so part of the story looks at that, how each of these three girls deal with this trauma. And then when they come back, it looks at how the community that they return to, the girls will, two of the girls will manage to escape and come back. So when they come back to the community, then the community is not accepting them because they have known a man is bad. So they're not really properly married and they're not girls anymore. So then who is more responsible of the problem these girls face and their trauma? Is it the radicals who took them or the community that doesn't accept them back?
Well, we'd like to invite you to read some of your work for us. What have you brought to share with our audience today?
I have, I can read on my published one.
Whatever you'd like to read.
Okay. In Father's Study, Ilmi, Sido, and I read books, articles from the October Star, the national daily newspaper, and even government documents and memos. The technical pieces were difficult to understand, others boring, but from time to time we stumbled upon something interesting and spent hours looking and reading. Sido was very good at picking poems. Read this one, he said, handing me a thin volume. It was a poem about a battle between two tribes, written by a man named Abdullah Hassan. It was long, violent, and glorious. Sido's excitement bubbled up before I could finish the first stanza. A great poem. He stopped me several times. Read it again, he said. I read the last 20 lines that described the final battle. The sounds and images of the fast-moving swords and daggers seemed to fill the room. How many people died, do you think? I directed the question to Sido without taking my eyes off the page. He didn't respond. I looked up. Sido was no longer across from Ilmi and me on the floor. Instead, he was sitting in Father's chair, something he'd never done before. He had a piece of paper before him, and as I approached the desk, I followed his eyes to his cupped hands, drawing vigorously on the page. His brows crunched together in a single line. Sido drew the battle as though he were there, watching everything from above the clearing. Bodies of the dead littered the page as the battle raged. Victorious clan members stood in the middle of the field, holding their weapons aloft. In the distance, on the side of the winning tribe, he drew a line of women advancing toward the men with open arms. On the losing side, the women held white sheets to prepare for the funeral. The sketch was intricate and detailed, beyond something such a young person could normally create. Where did you learn to do this? I don't know. You don't do this on art class. They tell me what to draw and I can't do that. I have to see it in my head. Sido watched my reaction. Do you understand? I wasn't sure I did. What do you think? He asked. I searched for a fitting response. I love it, I said. Indeed, I did. Here, he gave me the drawing. I snatched the sheet of paper away from him, lest he change his mind. I was in awe of both my luck and his generosity. Ilmi reached for it. I held it up so he could admire it, but I didn't want anyone to touch it, not even Ilmi. Sido's gift formed a deeper connection between us. I loved discussing literature with him, but I loved even more to see Sido through his drawing, through the shades, the lines, and the color on the pages. Sido morphed into more than a classmate. He became bigger and more important to me than any other boy. Draw the waterfall tournament, I demanded the following week. As the words passed my lips, I noticed how demanding I sounded. I wanted to grab them and shove them back in my mouth. If you don't mind, I added to soften my bossiness. I don't. He went to the box where Ilmi kept his art supplies. I'll do it right now. We moved to the sitting room. I stood in front of the decorative bay window. Tall panes of stained glass covered a third of the wall from floor to ceiling. I'll tell you what I remember from the last month's waterfall tournament, and you draw. Ready? I talked for a long time, swept away by the memory of my experience of the magnificent waterfall, and see those drawings materialize across the surface on the paper. Okay, let me see. He lifted the page, holding it before me. Here, I gasped. In the center of the drawing was a lone swimmer leaping out of the whirlpool, hands outstretched, smiling broadly. Water ran down his body in long streaks. His dark skin shone against clear water, and the droplets of side curls glittered like diamond dust. On the cliff overlooking the water, Sido drew a line of children clapping to mark the victory of the first swimmer to reach the surface. Below the image, they watched another in mid-flight, a cannonball hurling toward the whirlpool. The images, refined and innocent, filled me with joy. He extended the pad toward me. It's yours. My hand shook as I reached for it. This is the best gift I've ever had. I was still wrapped in the marvel of my beautiful gift when mother entered the room. She had made her way up the stairs and into the room without making a sound, and was upon me before she spoke. What do you think you're doing? She grabbed me by the elbow and dragged me away from Sido. This is what you spent your whole day doing? With him here? Your brother involved? Elmi was already retreating to his room. Sido moved toward the door, ready for a quick getaway, but he didn't leave. Mother waved her hand, encompassing the area. You have everything, and all you want is to bring him here? She took the drawing and held it away from her face. What is this? Saliva flew out of her mouth and spat at the page. He needs to go home. Mother knew Sido's name, but she refused to dignify him with it. He's leaving right now. Sido slunk away, a wounded animal, without saying goodbye. I wanted to run after him and take back the pain, wipe the tears I knew were inside, even if his cheeks were dry. Sorry, I called after him as a cheap substitute. Mother clenched her fists. I don't want to see you anywhere near that boy or the likes of him again. Why? Ask me again and I'll send you to Timbuktu. The first time Mother uttered that threat, I was 4 years old and believed Timbuktu was a place where young girls died. At 14, I would have gone to Timbuktu rather than sever my friendship with Sido. I ran out of the room. Mother didn't stop me.
Wonderful. Fartumo Kusow, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us. Look for more episodes of All Right in Sin City wherever you listen to podcasts, or check out our website, allrightinsincity.com. For information and announcements of new podcasts, sign up to our email list or follow us on Facebook and Twitter.